Welcome to the Buy Box Bandits podcast.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Buy Box Bandits podcast. Today, we're joined with Loree from Seller Investigators, which is a service to help you recover lost money from Amazon. So we're going to talk about how you can keep more of your hard-earned money through Amazon, basically. So thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you want to take us back? I assume this probably isn't your first experience with the Amazon space and everything. I'm also not familiar though. So you kind of want to talk about how just your journey and then how Seller Investigators came to be in Amazon and all that.
Sure. So I'm a serial entrepreneur for the last 25 plus years. I invented a wearable device, actually, that was one of the early wearable devices. And as a result, ended up on the platform as a seller. So, this, like most businesses, comes out of actual experiences that, pain points that you experience as a business. And I sold that business about 8 years ago. So call it 10 or 15 years ago. I met my now business partner, Rob Ferrara, who lives up in the Hudson Valley, so not too far from you guys in PA. But we met at a trade show in Hong Kong. And, he, like me, was a seller, and he, like me, suffered these pain points. After I sold my business, he came to me and said that, he'd been approached and that he thought there was a business here. His wife is Filipino, first generation American. And so they have mixed race kids. And so they wanted an opportunity to take their kids back to the Philippines and, have them experience the culture of their mom. And in so doing, that's where we sort of built our tech stack and built sort of our team. And that's kind of how we got started. Basically, the two of us having pain points from Amazon and him having the expertise of the Filipino folks that we utilize to give us a labor arbitrage, which makes this whole thing work.
So before we get into too much depth, you talk about the pain points. Let's kind of dig into the areas in Amazon in which sellers may be sort of experiencing some of these pain points and experiencing some of these losses funds.
Yeah, sure. So specific to sort of our space, I mean, there are pain points all over Amazon. Obviously, they're a huge business, and anybody who sells on FBA is small. Even the biggest of the big, even Pattern, which is the biggest company that sells on Amazon FBA, which is well north of $1 billion. They are relatively small given the scale of FBA on an annualized basis. So to speak specifically, I would say, within our space. Basically 1% of your net sales on average ends up being misaccounted for by Amazon. And it's well within your rights as an FBA seller to dispute those charges and to try and, I say, claw them back. Essentially what happens is when your inventory first lands into the warehouse, and we're talking FBA, by the way, this is all inventory management problems is where we kind of live. And so that inventory comes in. Amazon has your weight and the dimension already pre-inputted in their system of what your ASIN or your SKU, in Amazon, it's ASIN, what your ASIN is. So, let's just say it's an iPhone case, whatever it is. They know that it weighs X and it's whatever dimension. When you ship in a big box of a multi-pack, they don't necessarily look at your invoice and say, yep, there are 50 units in that box. They actually weigh and measure it with scales and lasers, and they determine based on what they have as your measurements, what's in the box. And so never to the good. So if you were in a retail environment like a Walmart or a Target in a traditional retailer, there'd be shrinkage on an invoice. Amazon doesn't do that. They should pay an invoice in full based on what you shipped in. And as it's consignment, they lose it along the way too. But essentially, you have a bad inventory count at the start, potentially, and then everything from when they ship it in between warehouses, or it gets run over by a forklift, or is no longer sellable for some reason, or it gets stolen or lost or damaged in some capacity. That inventory is under their control in their warehouse. They should compensate you for that. And if you don't dispute it, they won't normally. I mean, on occasion they will, but in general, they don't. So it works out to be when we audit accounts, we offer a free audit that's non-binding, and we look back 18 months, because within your FBA account within Amazon, or your agreement with your Seller Central account, you are allowed to look back 9 months for inventory issues that are related to inbound shipments and 18 months for lost and damaged. So, we can look back and find issues that happened in the past as well as stuff on a go-forward basis.
And so it is actually funny because a couple of our friends, and it's weird because it appears that different fulfillment centers experiment different levels of shrinkage, right? We
No
have one
doubt.
friend who ships to one particular fulfillment center, and it always seems that his units are 10 or 15 units off on a consistent basis. But then there's others, right? For whatever reason, exact, spot on every single time.
That's very consistent. We're actually auditing a very large account at the moment, and we are seeing some of the individual account. They have a bunch of different stores, and so some of the stores are having errors and some of them are not. And I suspect once we get into that data, we will find that the stores that are non-data producing or have very low problems are in particular warehouses. That's something that we see periodically. So you're right. There is some. It's seasonal, it's regional, it's type of, I don't know what it is. It's type of stuff that's in the stores, because, each warehouse is a little different. So, a warehouse in Florida is going to carry different stuff than a warehouse in Wisconsin, for example, just based on weather at the minimum. So, you have just all kinds of different reasons why these warehouses are not perfectly consistent across.
And Miles, remember the fulfillment center with the shoes a couple months ago?
Oh, that stuff's terrible, man. Yeah, the Indiana one. I think it's died down a little bit, but that was crazy.
IND4, I
Yeah.
think it was.
Yeah, so
many
shoes are a nightmare category, an
Yeah.
absolute nightmare category. Because what people do is, consumers do, which is terrible, and it's a sad testament to the country. But, and this is of course not everybody, but what you see is a higher incidence of this than other product or ASIN categories. People take the shoes, they either wear them and send them back worn, or they swap them out and put counterfeit shoes back in, or they swap them out and just put like cheapo New Balance
shoes,
stuff
yeah.
they get at like Payless, and they take a pair of Air Jordans and they claim, no, I ship back the Air Jordans. And so the net of it is shoes are a complex category for a lot of FBA sellers.
Yeah, they are changing their return rules. Had you seen that? Some of the updates on their return policies in the past couple.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon is a huge business, right? I mean, and they dictate policy in general, but as they go, they're always going to be morphing. I mean, I don't know if you guys follow, because I mean, this is more our space, but the fees and the rules on how long your inventory can be in the warehouse, they start charging you fees. They're always morphing that. And if you think about it, they need to do that because the business is always evolving. And it's growing and all the things around that. The complexity of their labor pool, the things that they have to deal with, all of those things obviously make Amazon a challenging business to run. But they also are a publicly traded business, and they need to figure out a way to make more money every quarter, or Wall Street's not happy. And so they find different ways, like the airlines or like car manufacturers or whatever else, or hotels or the government for that matter. They find different ways of making things more expensive over time. And so as an FBA seller, the cost of being on the platform is just going up, and it's going up not daily and weekly, but it is certainly going up by the quarter and by the year. And so as a result, it is essentially going up every day. And you couple that with the complexities of being physically on the platform, the need to advertise, the need to have consultants, the need to do all of these things to be able to compete with these very large brands that are backed with private equity and full of smart people, against your sort of mom and pop business that was, cruising along, doing a nice little clip. It's just getting more complex for you if you're not evolving and staying on the front edge of the curve.
So from a logistic perspective, right? You go into an account, you find that quote unquote 1%, 2%, whatever it is. And then what's that next step look like? Do you need help from the seller in order to actually get that money back?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically the way the process, the sort of the client arc for us is you sign up for our platform. It's free to sign up. It takes about 24 hours for us to run the audit. The audit comes back. It identifies, to your point, let's just say it's $1 million seller, and we identify between 8,500 and 10 grand that we look back and find. That's a fairly common practice for us to find.
And that's a seller who's never used a service before, correct?
Yeah, that's somebody who's never been doing it. And there are some options. That's a good point. So let's take a quick sidebar. You can do this yourself, technically. We find that most companies are about 50% efficient at doing it if they're dedicating resources to it. And then you could use a competitor, or you could be just ignorant of it and just ignore it. I'm talking about sort of a virgin account that hasn't had people in it. We tend to find about 10 to 15% behind our competitors, and we tend to find about double what you find internally. Of course, that varies, but that's a general rule of thumb that we find. Back to sort of the client arc. So the client has now found, let's just say $10,000. They want to move forward. They basically give us a credit card, because we don't do AR, because it's too much trouble to invoice people for $60. Because once you get over the initial push, you go into a maintenance situation, and we don't find lots and lots of money unless you're a huge account. We don't find lots of money every month. It tends to be more maintenance. But in the totality of the year, it ends up being a lot. So we take a credit card. Once you have that credit card on file, that triggers us to start filing cases. We do all the work. We do all the research. We do all the case filings. We do everything we can to keep the client, in this case, the FBA seller, out of the mix of dealing with this. What we do need from sellers, from private label sellers, or wholesalers, depending on what they are, the things we need from them are a little different. But we will need some documentation from time to time on inbound shipments. And that's because Amazon requires it. Absent of that, we really don't need the customer involved at all. And what we need by inbound shipments, it's PODs, bill of ladings, invoices, things like that we can't produce. We're able to generate some of that documentation internally by way of Amazon. But when we can't, we ask the customer. But it's normally a pretty simple process. And so it's a very hands-off process for the customer is the intention.
And so from what you've seen, is there any differentiation in terms of the sorts of receipts or invoices that Amazon will accept as opposed to stuff they turn away? Like receipts from Walmart or
there are
Kohl's
some
or
rules in
something?
the road that it has to be certain ways. It can't be photocopies. That it needs original signatures. There's some things around those types of things. The biggest problem is if you are an arbitrage person, or if you're running an arbitrage business. That arbitrage business, more often than not, and I'll just take an example where you bought a Monopoly game board because you knew it was going to be a hot product at Christmas, and you bought 50 of them from Target because you knew you could make $50 a unit. And obviously that is just an example, but the arbitrage people are basically doing that, going to Nike Town, they're going to Under Armour, they're doing whatever they're doing. Store receipts are not an invoice. And so Amazon does kind of push back on that. So for arbitrage folks, it can be more challenging to get back sort of all of your dollars. But for your wholesalers and private label folks, it doesn't tend to be a huge problem.
Yeah. And so if you're listening to this and you're RA, it's going to be really tough. If you're doing OA, what you have to do is, first of all, if you don't know how to use Google Sheets, give me an hour or two on Google Sheets learning basic formulas. But you got to record all your ASIN purchases and then your order confirmation numbers on a spreadsheet, so that when the time comes when you do need to produce these receipts, invoices, etc., that you can Command F on that spreadsheet if you're on a Mac and find the ASIN and then the corresponding order numbers, because you're going to need that at a certain point.
And that's a great point. And it's something that I talk about quite a bit. About 40% of what we typically find in an account is related to inbound shipments. And if you don't have documentation around that, we basically are at a dead end. We can't help you. If you are using a traditional sort of a UPS or a FedEx, or I guess you wouldn't really use DHL, but if you're using a traditional carrier, they only keep documentation on their servers that's accessible for 90 days. So if you don't make a copy of that, either digitally or physically, that you can reference when I ask you for it, 4 months later. Now, we don't wait 4 months to deal with problems. But if you won't have a system in place where you're keeping track of your documentation on your inbound stuff, you have the potential to miss out on quite a bit of money. So that's a great point. We always try to highlight people to keep some sort of a depository on their inbound shipment documentation.
And so you would recommend for every FBA inbound shipping to go and pull that documentation and store it somewhere?
I would. I mean, you wouldn't believe this, but we win $180,000 cases for people. Like, it's enough money that, I can't promise you that on every account, and I can't promise that on a $50,000 a year business, of course, but we absolutely have had many, many, many dozens of examples of north of $100,000 that was given back And we, of course, have to produce documentation for that.
Got you. Okay. And so going from your private label background, moving into the software side of things, how did you see like your skill set translate? Like how did like what you did, what you worked on basically change throughout that process? Because I assume it's a very different kind of skill set to go from managing.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
work
I
on-
think just being I think just being an entrepreneur is probably more valuable than what I learned on the FBA side. When I was on the platform, first of all, it was, 12 years ago. So the system was like so much less robust than it is today. And the challenges that sellers are facing, I just didn't have. I mean, I basically posted it. I bought a couple of Google terms, not Google, but I bought a couple of Amazon terms and did a little bit of advertising by push emails because that was what people did at the time. And we had a successful business. I mean, if I had somebody come to me and tell me that's how they ran their Amazon business today, I would laugh at them. I would be like, are you serious? Like it is so much more complex than that today. So I don't know that there was a whole lot of overlap, but having familiarity with the platform and understanding sort of the nuances even at the immature way that I knew it from, back when I was on the platform, I think has probably helped. My business partner has maintained a presence on the platform within his business. And so he's much closer to it than I am. And so he might be able to give more insight to that. But I mean, we've got over 2,500 clients on our platform. And, we're constantly talking to them. So I have a pretty good gauge for how the platform generally works for people, big and small. Nobody is thinking it's getting easier.
Yeah. And so something you led the podcast with, and something that's also going to resonate pretty heavily with our audience is leveraging workers in the Philippines, right? That whole geographical arbitrage aspect that is super advantageous to leverage. And so how did that whole idea start with, and how do you continue to leverage it with your business, and what sort of tasks do they do?
Yeah, so that's really sort of the secret sauce of our business. At the end of the day, going after these refunds, I mean, we tug into the API or tie into the API out of Amazon. We ingest the same reports as our competitors as you would if you try to do it internally. You wouldn't necessarily have built algorithms that you smash it against internally, but our competitors do. And while our algorithms can be better here and there, where we really differentiate is that our business at its core is based in the Philippines. And we have first line into those employees, and we have scaled that business, massively to the point where we have people on teams and verticals. We pay what are better than living wages in the Philippines because we think it's important to have continuity within our team. We promote from within. We work really hard to build a business like you might build in the United States that is, very forward facing and trying to be supportive of our employees. And, the way I would run a business in the United States, I think a mistake that some people make is that they think of the Philippines as a way to kind of get away with not having to pay full freight. And you don't have to pay full freight, but if you take care of people, the folks in the Philippines that we've experienced have been so hardworking and so honest and want to do the right thing and want to feel like they're part of the team. And we strive every day as a team, my partner and I, to feel like that and create that environment. He's actually in Asia right now with the teams, doing things. We go over periodically. We typically like to go one at a time so that somebody's here in the States to deal with anything that might happen just because of the time differences. But we run 24-hour shifts, folks day and night. And the Philippines has just given us just an enormous amount of leverage to be able to do that. A lot of what we do would just not be practical in the United States. The way Amazon makes you file cases, and they make you file cases peer-to-peer, like you can't just do this with bots, not that you could use ChatGPT, but you can't use those types of, I know, just throwing in a buzzword, but you can't do those things because of the way Amazon requires you to file cases. So because of that, doing this work in the United States is just virtually impossible.
Yeah,
And
it's
just out of
so
curiosity, what's the hierarchy look like? Is it just you and your partner and then all the VAs, or do you have any other stateside managers or assistants or
Yeah,
anything?
so we've got a few folks in the States. We have a COO in DC, and we have a couple of people that kind of run our onboarding
Hmm.
that are in the States. What's really great in the Philippines is that everybody speaks English, either as a native tongue or as a second tongue that's taught as though it was a native tongue. So everybody speaks English. So theoretically, we could be doing some of this work in the Philippines, but we just find that it's easier to manage in the States. So we have but a handful of employees in the States. And then, sort of they run teams in the Philippines as well. So we sort of have a hierarchy where my business partner and we have our CTO who's based in the Philippines is also a partner in the business. And he's amazing. So the three of us kind of run the business. He runs sort of the operations in the Philippines with support from my partner and sort of the folks here in the States. But, we've got dozens and dozens, kind of closing in on about 100. I think it's about 100 employees at this point in the Philippines. And they run teams. We have people who chase documents. We have people that help with supporting onboarding. We have people that do, case management. We have people that file cases. We have people that do research. I mean, we have teams that do things and they're managers with each one of those, so that we've just found that putting people in those lanes makes everything much more efficient.
Interesting. Cool. So you said it's about 2,500 seller accounts that you guys work with?
It's something like that. I mean, we're always running. So until we get a credit card on file, we don't consider them on the platform.
Yeah.
And we're onboarding a lot of clients kind of on a daily basis. And so there's always sort of a lag when we have somebody initially sign up. Sometimes, almost immediately, they will put in a credit card and off they go. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 phone calls. Sometimes they never do. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. There are all kinds of variables, but we are always working sort of accounts that haven't completely onboarded for about 6 or 8 weeks. We do that. And so there's a pretty big block of accounts that haven't kind of completely onboarded. So I think it's about 2,500, but every day it's growing. So
I wonder if it'd be able to scrape email addresses of like sellers with a certain amount of reviews and then like cold email them or something. I feel like that'd be an innovative way that like might be possible.
There are actually some pretty neat data. We've actually purchased some pretty interesting databases for a long time. Up until the fall of last year, we were an independent business. In September, we were purchased by Carbon6, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but it's
definitely.
software.
Yeah, we both work with them. Yep.
And that's really opened up the doors for us from a marketing perspective. It's brought in a whole team of BDRs. It's brought in, a whole lot of things that are really kind of driving initiatives within our business that we weren't doing before. We were doing pretty much cold email campaigns before. And so those cold email campaigns were actually like 4 or 5% response rates, which is pretty remarkable for cold email.
Absurdly high.
Absurdly good.
You figure it's online business owners, reading those, like, they're checking stuff a lot more than that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's also
we had some hooks that we put in there. We made it interesting. We kind of created series. We bought lists that were pretty interesting that we cross-referenced with some interesting data. It wasn't just buying a list and praying, but it was pretty effective. And we've got some pretty big databases that we use now. We've put a real effort into buying lists.
It's also not a very hard ask, right? When you approach someone, it's like, I know you're losing money. I'm not asking for anything up front. Let me help you, and then we'll talk at the end, right? You know
That's
what I'm saying?
right. I mean, that's all I'm asking for. I'm not trying to get you to buy the business, buy in. I just say, look, let me run an audit. It's free. There's no obligation. It doesn't hurt you. It takes you 5 minutes. And, if you've been doing it internally, I'll show you, we can probably make you more, and I can give you that time back for your employee. Or if you've been working with a competitor, I'll show you that they just really haven't been doing a very good job as a steward of your business. Or if you haven't been doing it at all, let me help you and show you how I can crush this for you. Most Amazon businesses now are running, a good business is typically running about a 20% net margin. So if we can get you back 1% of net sales, it's like 5 points of EBITDA. It's a huge needle mover relative to your business for the amount of effort that it takes to sign up.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about the whole offer is that there's no upfront, right? You just take whatever you find, a percentage of it, and I think that's one of the coolest things. Also,
Yeah,
just
and
out of
by the way, and so people are going to wonder, the going rate is 25% of what we're successful getting back. It is a scalable number. As you get bigger, as we sort of have, as there's more needs, and I mean that by like millions, not hundreds of thousands, but as you get up into being a bigger account, we become more flexible around our pricing to a degree.
Makes sense.
Because scale helps us the same way it helps you.
And we also have a discount code if you
I
want
was
to
just
scroll
gonna
down
say,
in the
yeah,
Yeah, I was
yeah.
going to
details of
say,
this
yeah,
video.
and we're
Yeah, link in
and
the
we're running a
description, yeah.
discount code because of here. Correct.
Sweet.
Out of curiosity, what's the delta between you and some of the competitors? Are there different reports that are being run? Is your team just more fluent in what's going on? Where does that delta lie?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and I don't know. The short answer is that we don't know. Basically, we run audits behind competitors, and historically, we find between 10 and 15% that's being missed, neglected. We don't really know, but that tends to hold up, and it holds up basically on a daily basis. I mean, they're running the same data through the system. Is it our API? Is it our people? Excuse me, is it our algorithms? Is it our people? Is it our diligence? Is it our access into Amazon? I mean, at this point, the amount of dollars that we're getting back is, millions a month from Amazon. And so as a result, we have tie-ins in Amazon. Carbon6 has tie-ins in Amazon. We have access into the right people. It's hard for me to say what does it, but I would guess it's a combination of all of it.
Yeah, and then how do you see the future of the Amazon space in general? Because I've been at it for about 4 years, been moderately successful for like 2 years basically, and I personally see it continue to grow and obviously change. But I'm curious your thoughts. Like, are you super bullish or kind of it's just changing? Yeah,
for sure, super bullish. I mean, I think that if you're not on Walmart, I think that in the next year or two you will be. It's just another set of eyes, another way to push into eyeballs. Walmart's scaling their online platform very rapidly. Amazon is not going away. I mean, they're getting into, sending you prescription drugs. They're getting into, all kinds of different avenues. Now, that's not going to be applicable to you being an FBA seller, but I mean, are you, with all the crazy that's going on in the world and the complexities of your life and whatever else, are you looking to start going and buying an iPhone case at a store? I mean, come on.
No.
I mean, nobody's going back to that. Like Amazon, and they dominate the space in that capacity. So, I mean, in our house, I mean, we get 3 or 4 packages a day because my wife just does not want to go anywhere other than the grocery store anymore. And, it's everything from, I bought a desk online the other day, a stand-up desk. Watch. Just the other day, I bought a stand-up desk. And I bought it on Amazon. So it's, that's not going away. It's just not.
very good. Cool. Okay. And then just as we finish up here, are there any like big mistakes outside of tracking lost inventory you see a lot of Amazon sellers make, or just like entrepreneurs in general, people want to be more efficient? Is it hiring VAs, different stuff like that? Just mistakes you see a lot of Amazon sellers make, if any, or things you would do differently, etc.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would say, I don't know that it's if it's a mistake per se, but what we see, and this is common, this is not Amazon, this is entrepreneurs in general. When you have a relatively small business, and it can be big to you, but I'm saying relative to sort of what we're talking about. And I would say $1 million is a good threshold for big versus not big. If you're selling under $1 million, more often than not, that seller is holding on too tightly to all the details. They're trying to be everything. They're trying to run the PPC. They're trying to run the inventory management. They're trying to do the refunds. They're trying to source new products. They're trying to deal with banking. They're doing all of it because they feel like it's, it's their business. The people that let go of some of that control and hire consultants, and I don't mean just us, I mean like, Carbon6 has a whole suite of goods. But if you were buying into some of the things like PixelMe, for example, that allows you to track attribution from off platform onto Amazon, so you can see that your Google ads are working, as an example. but you don't know how, you're not super good at PPC. You should have a consulting company doing that, using a Pixel Me as a widget to then figure out a way for you to go and do what you do well, rather than you trying to be pretty good at everything. The reality of it is there are companies that have come in and brought in experts within each category, and they're cleaning your clock if you're not using some of the more sophisticated tools.
We completely makes sense. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, and everyone, you can check out Seller Investigators if you want to, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me, guys.